Okay. Thank you, Ken, and thank you for Atlassian for having me here today. My name is Rebecca Glassman, as I said, and I'm the Product Documentation Manager at Opower. And I'm here to talk to you about scaling your wiki. But before we get started with that, I wanted to just tell you a little bit of background about Opower itself so you know where I'm coming from. Opower is a software company that partners with utilities to help their customers save energy. So 6 minutes. On average, people spend about 6 minutes a year thinking about their energy usage. And I'm willing to guess that most of us probably spent more than 6 minutes today trying to figure out what we wanted for lunch from the food trucks. This is a really sad statistic, right? So Opower is on a mission to change this. We motivate people to pay attention to their energy usage and change their behavior. You might wonder if just providing people with information about their energy usage really makes a difference. The answer is absolutely. So Opower has already helped customers save almost 3 terawatts of energy. You might have noticed in your little description of this track it said 2 terawatts. Well, that's because that was a couple months ago. So we're almost to 3 terawatts already at this point. And that is equal to about $325 million of savings for utility customers. 3 terawatts is enough to run the Sydney Opera House, the Eiffel Tower, and London's Olympic Stadium for over 100 years. We do this in a lot of ways. So many people in this room may receive one of our printed home energy reports. You may not know these come from Opower because they don't necessarily have an Opower logo on it. They probably have your utility logo on it. But right at the bottom, it will say run by Opower. We also have communications like email reports, and we have a web app, and alerts, and all kinds of ways we communicate with people about their energy. This is going to tell you how much you use compared to your neighbors, highlight when you're using the most, and provide energy-saving tips. My role at Opower is to lead the documentation team effort to provide actionable information about our products to our internal employees, to utilities, and to utility customers. And this includes deliverables like a Confluence knowledge base, so our wiki primarily, our online help, API guides, and all kinds of other communications. Now that you know a little bit about Opower, I want to tell you a little story about Opower's wiki. So 3 short years ago, Opower had less than 100 employees, a handful of products, and only a couple people on each team that served each role. And if you had a question, chances are you knew the person that had the answer. You would just walk down the hall and say, hey Tom, what are the product requirements for reports? And Tom would answer the question. And if you forgot, you'd walk back down the hall again and say, hey Tom, what are the product requirements for reports? And Tom would answer the question. After a while, Tom started getting really irritated with this situation, and you do not want to make Tom irritated. So somebody thought, let's start building a wiki. And they hired a tech writer eventually, who was me, to join the team and create an internal product knowledge base. And we designed this knowledge base much like you would an English garden here. So there's a place for every genus and species. Some helpful wiki gnomes popped up on their own to keep things in line and add additional content. And with the right amount of preparation and nurturing, the garden started to grow on its own. And at first, we were thrilled just because we wanted to see growth, and it meant people were actively collaborating and contributing. Last spring, we hit 100,000 page views in 1 month with less than 400 users. And we were so excited about how awesome our knowledge sharing culture was that we bought the entire company ice cream. We were thrilled. So guess how many page views we got the next month just after buying ice cream? Any guesses? 16? 121,000. So that's pretty good growth just from ice cream. So if you remember one thing, I want you to remember ice cream equals page views. We were starting to realize, though, that our wiki garden had evolved from healthy growth to the beginnings of an overgrown mess, as you can see here. We had purposely left our wiki open to encourage collaboration and innovation and transparency, but this meant that around our product knowledge base was a 25,000 plus page wiki jungle with over 600 new pages added a month. Now, I always thought it would be incredible to go on a jungle expedition. Jungles have amazing sites, they're filled with incredible diversity, but if all I want is that report product requirement, I really don't want to go to all that trouble and risk getting lost in that search. I just want to find what I'm looking for. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is making sure that as your wiki scales, you still have a way to connect your users to the information that they need the most. So how did our wiki transform from a garden to a jungle? Probably for many of the same reasons you guys are sitting in this room right now, right? The fact is that hypergrowth is a hyper problem for knowledge management. Raise your hand if any of these sound like your company as we go along. So Opower hires as quickly as it can find great people. There's nothing else limiting us from hiring right now. We went from less than 100 people to almost 500 people in 3 years, and the list of things these people need to know to get up to speed gets longer and longer every single day. Opower moves quickly, so we add new product lines all the time. In the beginning, we had that one printed home energy report, and now we partner with utilities to provide their customers with all kinds of communications to help save money and energy. Opower iterates constantly. We have 3-week iterations. This means that anything in our products may change every week, and we might have to change the documentation on it. This is extremely challenging from a documentation perspective. Opower is global. We now have utility clients and offices all over the world with their own special needs and localization requirements. Opower's teams are multiplying and becoming more specialized. Each team has its own domain knowledge and information needs. As a result of all these factors here, our little docs team of what was then 2 was constantly playing the catch-up game and trying to fill in individual concerns, but we weren't making real progress at addressing the root causes of our problems. But with great wiki challenges come great opportunity, and Opower made a strategic business decision to invest in its wiki. As much as hypergrowth makes knowledge management difficult, it also makes knowledge management essential. In order to sustain your growth, we need a reliable system of record to help with onboarding, to enable your employees to sell and support your products, and to serve as the authoritative source of information on how your products work. Now that you've heard a little bit about the challenges we were up against, let's take a look on how we got on the road to solving them and what you can do to tackle your own scaling challenges. So we're going to take a look at the symptoms of scaling problems. So you can think of this as your wiki early warning system, how you can uncover the root causes of these problems, and finally, real solutions to help solve similar problems. All right, let's start by talking about symptoms. You may have a scaling problem if you get the bad Wiki Buzz. So this is the most obvious sign that you're going to hear of a problem, right? People may start to say things like, I love the wiki, but I can't find what I need. Search doesn't work. Information is missing. And on and on. And this buzz tends to feed on itself. And before you know it, your wiki is going to have a bad reputation. A reputation is a really, really hard thing to fix. Even if you fix the underlying problems, you still have to win back hearts and minds and get everybody to give your wiki a second chance, which is a really hard thing to do. So save yourself the effort, and as soon as this buzz starts, start looking into these complaints and where they're coming from. The volume of complaints that we were hearing at Opower prompted us to take a more comprehensive look at our wiki. You might have a scaling problem if people start hoarding information in other systems of record. So you might hear something like, I'm going to save this information in a Google Doc so I can get to it later on. In our interviews with key stakeholders of the company, we found that 100% of people that we talked to had their own safe personal location for information they had independently verified. And this was either their own space on the wiki or outside of the wiki, but everybody had their own place. This is dangerous. You might have a scaling problem if people request new knowledge sharing tools all the time. So you might hear something like, I can't find it on the wiki, let's buy another tool instead. If you've got a team like Opower where people love to tackle challenges head on, they might just go directly to trying to build brand new tools themselves to serve these functions. And these may not be necessary. So here's a scary sampling of some of the tools we have used or are currently using at Opower. I can tell you there are way too many of them. I was spending an increasing amount of my time explaining how a new tool was not the best long-term solution to our challenges. If you don't have a federated search for all these tools, which most people don't because it's expensive and difficult to implement, then adding another tool just means that you have all these other places to look for information, right? And eventually, it's going to work really well in the beginning. And guess what? They're going to run into the exact same scaling issues that you're having with your wiki if you don't get into the underlying problems. You might have a scaling problem if there's a major influx of product questions. So we might hear, I'm not sure if this is current, so I'm going to go directly to the product manager and ask them the question. If your wiki has a credibility problem, people may feel like they can only trust the expert. So they're going to go to that person over and over again with the same questions. And that person's going to spend all of their time answering questions instead of doing the work at which they are the expert. And this is only going to get worse over time as your company scales. You might have a scaling problem if people start making more mistakes. They might say, I didn't know I could only sell that feature in the US. It didn't say so on the wiki. People may sell the wrong product, be unable to diagnose a problem, or miss key steps in a process. So these are all signs that you may need to address your scaling problem sooner rather than later. Now let's take a look at looking at the underlying causes. So what should you do to get started? First of all, manage your wiki like a product. So if you're the product manager of a product with challenges, what are you going to do? If you're a bad product manager, then you're just going to start adding in every new feature and trying to fill every request for new functionality that comes your way. If you're a good product manager, you're going to take the time to unearth the fundamental problems with your product. Here are 5 ways you can get started in doing this. So stakeholder interviews, metrics, usability testing, question tracking, and knowledge mapping. We're going to talk about each of these in more depth. I strongly suggest when you get back to your office next week, just try one of these out, and you are going to learn something new about how your wiki works. Stakeholder interviews. So this should be the easy one, right? So you're just going to get a bunch of people or an individual stakeholder in a room and talk about the wiki. So this doesn't take a lot of structure or preparation. Just open up your wiki, ask a couple open-ended questions, and people are going to start chiming in or, unfortunately, venting, as the case may be, right? Everybody's got an opinion. So be sure to talk to people from a variety of groups. So this is going to include people in different roles in your company, new hires, and more experienced people that have been here from the beginning, technical and non-technical staff, casual browsers, and contributors that are always on the wiki adding content. And importantly here, you want to include management. Even if they're not using the wiki all the time, this is a good time to kind of show them what you're doing, that you're having these kinds of conversations, because they may not know otherwise. I've got a really good example of why you want to make sure you're touching all these representative groups at your company. So you may hear the same complaint from new hires and people with experience, and that is they can't find content on the wiki. When we talk to new hires, we learned that they're much more likely to use the table of contents and try to browse for content. More experienced employees, when they say this, they just mean the search doesn't work how they want it to work. These are 2 very different problems with very different solutions, but we wouldn't have understood the complexity of this issue if we didn't have these types of conversations. You can ask questions like, how often do you use the wiki? What frustrates you about the wiki? What other systems of record do you use? And what are the 5 most important things that your team needs on the wiki? I divided the feedback I got from this into actionable feedback that we are definitely going to incorporate, the type of thing you can check off, and more general feedback that we could keep in mind when designing our new solution. We learned, for example, that the more client-facing the group was, the less they used the wiki. So on the 2 sides of the spectrum, sales was the least likely to use the wiki, and engineering was on it constantly. The 2 major points of frustration were about credibility and accessibility. So our users wanted to have confidence that they could sell and support the product based only on the information on the wiki. And they wanted it to be easier to find the information that they needed. As we already went over, we had way too many systems of record, and people would bring this up all the time. But the one that came up the most was Salesforce. So sales did not want to have to go to Salesforce and then go to the wiki and remember which type of information was in each one. And the most consistent request for content was about product limitations. So people can generally figure out on their own how the product should work. That's pretty easy, right? You can play with it, you can look at pictures. It's much harder to figure out what the limits of the products are, and importantly, why those limits exist from the beginning. Now let's move on to metrics. So metrics are critical, and they're incredibly easy to gather for Confluence. Management loves metrics, and they don't expect to see them coming from a docs team. So you have some real wow factor here, and it's easy. If you haven't already gotten Confluence hooked up with Google Analytics yet, you want to do that right now. So Google Analytics lets you track things like page views, visits, and time on site. It's particularly helpful in identifying the content that's the most popular and the content that's being overlooked. At the page level, we also use the view tracker macro. So we insert this macro into the bottom of our page templates, so you can always tell who's looking at what. So for example, if we have a page meant for sales, are salespeople names popping up on this page? If they're not, what's the gap? Why can't they find this content? If another team starts popping up on this page, are they getting there by accident because of a page name problem, a label, something like that? Or do they also really need this content too, and we didn't know that? Finally, we use some of the usage macros that come with Confluence to track things like the new pages, edits, and top users. Metrics are going to tell you what's working on your wiki and what's not, and they're going to give you the data you need to get management's attention. UX testing. You do not need a UX team to do usability testing. Don't tell them I said that, but it's true. So keep it simple. Here's a 6-person, 6-question method to do some easy usability testing. So for each person, schedule a 15-minute meeting. Sit them down, open the wiki, and ask them to use the wiki to answer a question. So for example, what's a particular data requirement, or who's the product manager for a particular product? But pick whatever kind of information is critical for your particular company, right? Observe how they try to answer the question. Give them no more than 2 minutes to answer the question, but tell them they can give up whenever they would normally give up. And I can tell you right now, people give up fast, way faster than you want them to. So I would say everybody gave up well within the first minute when I did this. After 6 questions, that person's done. That's all you need from them. And then repeat this with 5 more people. So we ended up doing this with a lot more people, but 6 is definitely enough to get started. The key information you want to record would be things like, did they search your browse? Just yes or no. If they searched, what kind of keywords did they use? If they browsed, where did they start looking for this information? How many levels deep did they go? Did they ultimately find the answer to their question? And if not, ask them where they would have expected to find the answer and see if there are trends there. In less than 2 hours of your time, if you talk to 6 people, you are going to learn amazing things about your wiki. So we found that 55% of the time, people were trying to find the answer in the table of contents, and 45% of the time, they were using the search. I was blown away by this. People were using the table of contents way more than I thought they were. And that may be that the search wasn't working well enough. I don't know. But that kind of surprised me. Users skip landing pages. So if you have this beautiful parent page with a bunch of children underneath it that has the really important information, guess what? They're probably skipping that and looking right at the child page. So don't put the critical information only up at that parent level. Also, when they search, users only really check the top 2 or 3 search results. They don't go a lot deeper than that. So if they don't see their solution there, they may just quit. I would have learned this stuff just by talking to people about the wiki. You really have to watch people use it. There's no replacement for that. Let's talk about question tracking. And you have to keep in mind this predates this awesome new question solution that Confluence just came out with today. So our PMs have started to get completely buried in product questions. So we decided to do a little experiment. Last fall, we had 3 PMs write down all the product questions they were asked for 3 weeks. So 80 questions came in from a total of 37 people, just to these 3 PMs. All the PMs had to do was copy these questions to a spreadsheet. So it wasn't a lot to ask for them. It was a really easy sell. And the docs team loved this because it let us start tracking trends in the questions. So for example, people kept asking what could be customized in our products. And we could not figure out why. It was very frustrating because we have a page called Product Customizations, and if you searched, it came up at the top search result every single time. And it turns out that the problem was how we had phrased the page itself. So we explicitly said, these are the things that can be customized. but we didn't explicitly say, here are the things that cannot be customized. And that little bit of ambiguity was enough to make people ask over and over again, because they thought, oh, maybe they just left it off the page or something. I'll ask them, right? So that's the kind of insights we started to pull from this exercise. We also learned a lot of other things. So we learned that of the questions that were asked, when I went back and looked at it, about 55% of them were really easy to find on the wiki. The other 45, they had a point. It was pretty hard to find them. The two groups were responsible for most of the questions that we were asked. So these were our technical product managers and our engagement managers, who are both very client-facing. We learned that 8 people asked half of those questions. So this is a great thing to go to those 8 people and be like, would you like some wiki training? Would you like a tour of the knowledge base? I can help you out with that. It freaks them out when you do that, too. They're like, how do you know that? I don't know. And we learned that experienced employees actually ask more questions than new hires, which really kind of surprised me. So our biggest lesson learned was that we had to centralize this Q&A data to gather insights and improve our resources. So we created an Ask Product email address and utilized Jira issues for email. So whenever any Opower employee sends an email to Ask Product, this email address, it automatically creates a ticket for my docs team. And my docs team basically does tier 1 question support for all of Opower. We created this rapid board here using the Jira Agile add-on, and this is where we manage our questions for the company. And tickets are in one of 3 states. So open tickets are ones that haven't been answered or documented. In progress tickets are answered, but we have not been documented yet. And closed tickets have been answered and documented in our knowledge base. And that's the only way you can close a ticket is by documenting it. This had benefits for everyone. So people asking questions got much quicker responses because they weren't waiting for a product manager to get their answer. Docs usually has a lot more free time and can be way more responsive. We also know where the wiki resources are, so it was really easy to just point them in the right direction there. The person with the question didn't have to know who to ask the question to. So they could just throw the question to us, and if we couldn't quickly answer it, then we would forward it to the right product manager for them. So we took that out of the equation, the trying to search for the expert. PMs had a lot fewer questions to answer about basic product behavior. And we remind them that a question you answer for Ask Product is a question that you never need to answer again. Tell them this. This is really powerful because they are sick of answering the same questions. And it was really great for docs because everyone's giving us the gaps in our documentation. We don't have to go looking for those. We're going to get them right from these questions. And we can identify those roadblocks to people finding the answers. So this is a really good example of how a minimum viable solution is often enough to get started on the right path. If it works, then you can make a longer-term investment, like setting up a rapid board like this. Ask Product is now a part of the Opower culture, and other groups have created their own email addresses just like this and Jira boards for tracking questions across the company. Here's a big view of our product knowledge map. So don't worry, I'm going to zoom in a second. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview here. So knowledge mapping is a great tool to help you learn about your information requirements. There are all kinds of knowledge maps that you can make, and in this case, we created an extensive product knowledge map by interviewing experts from every major group at Opower who needed product information. On the horizontal axis here, we have listed all the groups we interviewed. So for example, product managers and engineers. On the vertical axis, we have listed the product information they might need, like channel availability, contacts on other teams, data requirements, that kind of information. And then participants were asked to rank each type of information as critical, nice to have, or would not reference. And you can see here the dark blue was critical, the light blue was nice to have, and the white was probably wouldn't reference and don't want to see because it would be in my way. Then we asked a really important question, which is, what did I forget? And this really gives an open forum for them to tell me what was most important to their teams, which is often not even on the map, not even what I was thinking about. We used this map to identify the most critical information for each group, but we also used it to create stakeholder clusters based on similar information needs. So we could see from that our technical support and professional service engineers overlapped by like 90%. So they were very similar in their information needs. And I'll show you in a minute how this went into the design of our new product knowledge base. After gathering all this information, we decided that we did want to redo our knowledge base. And we're going to need more resources to do this because there's 2 people, and that wasn't enough. So this is where the value of doing your homework comes in. We weren't not going to management with a giant list of problems and complaints that we were hearing from everybody. We went to them with metrics and a knowledge map and all these other artifacts, just like we were a product manager trying to make a case for a product redesign. When we found that sales needed more information about our products, we took the opportunity to make our case. So since improving sales would be a very tangible benefit for the company, this was the perfect moment to get support from management. We shared our plans with our VP, and he was a great champion to sell our vision to the rest of the management team. We were able to get buy-in, started recruiting for 2 new writers, and embarked on a multi-quarter project to build a new product knowledge base. In the end, we decided to model our wiki off of a national park. Most of the wiki is still a wild and wonderful wilderness where people have the freedom to share and explore, but there's also an area for the general public with trails and labels and a map to highlight the major attractions and make sure that you don't get lost. And the role of my docs team is as much to curate this content as it is to create new content. From our research, there are 3 things we knew we had to get right in order to help our knowledge base grow at scale with Opower. Chances are that your research may uncover some similar results, so feel free to look into these areas first. The first would be sustainability. Our old product knowledge base was just way too hard to maintain. We had to find a framework that would make it easy to add information on our new products and maintain the content that was already there. Number 2, accessibility. It was just too hard for people to find what they were looking for. We had to address issues with search and discovery and target content to more specialized roles. Number 3, credibility. When people found content, there was no way for them to know if it was true. There wasn't enough to distinguish the content the docs team maintained from all the other content on the wiki. We had to do something to set this content apart so people knew it was content that they could trust. Our new product knowledge base was called the book, and this is short from the body of Opower knowledge. The book is the home for new internal product guides, client guides, our product roadmap, our Opower glossary, all kinds of other product documentation. So let's talk a little bit about how the book addresses the root cause of our scaling problems and what you could do to build something like the book. Sustainability. So after all of your hard work, you do not want your park to turn back into a jungle. So here's some ideas on how you can sustain your park over time. Number 1, narrow the scope only to what is critical. Every internal product guide in the book was based on a series of templates. There was a home for every type of product information that we identified in the knowledge map. For example, every product page had a limitation. Every product had a limitations page that listed the technical limitations, roadmap limitations, and product requirements. If there was extra information that wasn't of interest to most people, it could be linked to from the book, and that's fine, but it wasn't going to live in it. If new information was considered critical, we'd make a home within each guide for that information. It would always be consistent. Number 2, plan for maintenance, and do not be surprised by it. So we plan for frequent updates in every way possible. We created an extensive snippet library using the multi-excerpt macro. And any text that appears in the book more than once is housed in a snippet. That's the rule. We even have a snippet library for our images. So if something in the UI changes, which guess what, it's going to happen all the time, we update it in one place in the book, and it's updated everywhere else in the book. We also use the archive macro to identify the pages that haven't been touched in a long time, so we can make sure the content is not getting neglected. Number 3, let others contribute, but within bounds. So our docs team was never going to have the specialized knowledge of all the mini groups at Opower. There's no way we were going to do that. There was always the possibility that people were going to find an error in our content or want to fill in a missing gap. And this is a good thing. So instead of making a request for these updates, we still provide the ability for everyone to edit book content. Instead of restricting pages and imposing a bunch of rules, which would be like a very un-Opower-y thing to do, we just added the ad hoc workflows plugin. So anybody can make edits to the book, and then 2 people from the product team have to approve those changes before they get put up there. So anybody can edit, but there's that little check on top of things. Accessibility. This is what you can do to make sure your information is accessible at scale. So number one, consider search and discovery. So as you can see here in our table of contents, we created multiple paths to find content. People can find what they need by navigating to the information by role or by product, or they could use the search. The structure and organization of the content had to be consistent so that people always know what to expect. Organizing content by role doesn't mean you create separate content for every role in your company. That would be crazy, right? But we use those stakeholder clusters from our knowledge mapping exercise to break the information down into 3 separate guides. So we had an overview guide meant mostly for sales, a client engagement guide meant for people like our engagement managers, for example, and a more technical setup and ops guide to handle the other group. And we worked on the overview guide first, since we knew that the critical limitations and product requirements needed to be covered first. In addition to targeting content by role, keep in mind that you can tell people what to do with that content by role, right? So for example, you might tell one group to put a watch on a page because you want them to know if anything changes in this. And you might tell another group to just read it once for background, like when they first joined the company. To help improve search results, we use the boost macro and labels. Number 2, incorporate lessons learned from UX testing. So we kept our table of contents to less than 3 layers, and we didn't include critical information only on those landing pages. Number 3, don't forget about other systems of record. So very few people, unfortunately, are only doing their job completely on the wiki, right? So you need to consider accessibility to other systems. A major win for our book was to use the Confluent Salesforce macro to pull in information about our clients directly onto the wiki. So this allows people to stay in their wiki workflow, and I don't have to worry about them getting lost between the 2 tools. We used our wiki to show information from Salesforce, Jira, Google Docs, PowerPoint, Prezi, and some other ones as well. Credibility. So we want to provide a single authoritative source of product knowledge. If we did not solve our credibility crisis, then no matter how hard my team worked and how much content we wrote, it wasn't going to help because people are still going to be afraid to rely only on that content, and they were still going to go to the product managers for information. Here are a couple ways to help establish credibility. So number 1, set critical content apart. All of our book content is held in a separate space with its own space search, so it's really clear what content is being actively maintained. Number 2, brand it. All of the book content is branded. With the help of our design team, we created a strong brand. So here's our little book logo there, the check me out. So everybody at Opower knows this little book logo, and if they see it on a page, they know that it's official content that they can trust. We also made the color scheme and page layout different, so it would always stand out. Number 3, promote it, right? Market your wiki. So we started a campaign to market it as trusted content. Management endorsed the book via an email to the entire company. We added the book to our new hire wiki training so people hear about it on their first day at the company. We had a book roadshow where we demoed the book to all the different groups at Opower, and we took the extra time to customize each demo to highlight the special features of the book that we built just for that group, so it was designed for them. We used Camtasia to create a 2-minute welcome to the book video for new hires or people who couldn't make the training, so at least they got a little intro to how to use it. And we created some promotional items with a logo that I'm going to show you in just a minute. So let's look at some results here. You can see our juggling balls. We used the form macro to create a feedback page in the book, so whenever anybody leaves any feedback, it goes directly to everybody on the docs team. It's really easy to do. And in order to incentivize feedback, we got a little marketing budget, which we spent on these book-themed juggling balls. So juggling is a very big deal in Opower engineering, and we wanted to help spread this out to the rest of the company. And I have some to give away for questions if we have time. Just do not ask me to juggle because it's a train wreck. So the feedback we received was overwhelmingly positive. I got a couple quotes here to share with you. So this is going to help Opower be a better company. Awesome. The book looks great, using it daily already, which is just what we want. And my favorite, the brief but powerful book equals rad, right? So what makes me all warm and fuzzy is that these came from completely different people, completely different roles in the company, completely different information needs, but there was something in this book for all of them. And I really honestly did not know that people could get so excited about a wiki space. On the metrics front, the landing page for our knowledge base had 10 times the number of views compared to our own knowledge base. One of our guides, the alerts guides, for example, had 7 times the number of page views. And the landing page was the 4th most popular page on the entire wiki, behind like the search, the main one you go to when you go to the wiki, and the login page. So you can have similar results if you keep the following in mind. Think of hypergrowth as a hyper opportunity for knowledge management. Knowledge management can enable you to grow faster. Manage your wiki like a product. And design your wiki after a national park. Focus on sustainability, accessibility, and credibility. And no matter what you do, do not forget about the page views. Before I open the floor to questions, I just want to answer a few that I know many people are thinking. So as you can tell from these pictures here that I pulled off our wiki, Opower is a really cool place to work. We're all wearing sunglasses, right? On my team, it's awesome. In particular, it's a really great place to be a tech writer. So management is really supportive of knowledge management initiatives. And if you're not in this kind of environment, which realistically many of you probably are not, I know I haven't been in the past, you may well have some questions like these. What if I don't have enough people or resources? Start small. There should be nothing stopping you from doing a 2-hour usability test. Create a minimum lightweight solution. And if you have more bandwidth, start to create something like a mini book for one type of information and gradually fold in other information as you can. What if you can't afford plugins? So very few of the macros I mentioned here actually cost money. And for the ones that, if you can't buy them, there's usually a workable alternative. So for example, if you can't afford the ad hoc workflows plugin, just restrict the pages and have updates go directly through the docs team. What if you can't get cross-team consensus on a solution? So start with the information that your team owns and go from there. Lead by example. It's not a real thing until people see it. So this is basically how we crafted almost all of the Opower wiki, is we led by example on the product space, and then guess what? Other people just start doing their own thing. How do you get support from management? So have those metrics ready that we've talked about, and look for the opportunity to raise the profile of your project. Market the project as a solution to problems that management actually cares about. So for example, anything having to do with sales is a winner, or anything having to do with support and reducing the number of support calls. So what does the future look like for our book? So we've still got a lot of work to do. We've converted about half of our products guides over to it. In keeping with the idea of treating our wiki like a product, the book has a roadmap of its own and lots of planned improvements in a Jira backlog that we maintain. We're continuing to track metrics and product questions to help prioritize this backlog. And it's so much easier to fill questions now that we have the book to reference. We're going to do another round of usability testing and make sure people are still finding what they need. Now, let's answer some questions and give away some juggling balls real quick. I think we have like 2 minutes and 30 seconds for a couple questions.
We'll go quick. And we have a microphone here, so if you have a question over there, find Dave. If you have a question over here, find me. Anyone?
What were some of the things you did to incentivize users to create content?
To create content? So actually, amazingly, that's kind of never been a problem at Opower, which is a fantastic thing. So we're kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum there. But definitely, like all those things like having templates in place. Now you've got the blueprints, which is even better. So just removing those barriers to having the blank page. And a lot of times, giving those models. So when it's a whole new team space, for example, just like pointing to the product space and being like, take this structure, you need pages like this, has worked out well.
Question about the ad hoc workflow.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of myself as somebody that might contribute. If I know ahead of time that my contributions may not be accepted, I might not be inclined to add anything at all. Why would you not just monitor the page and catch it after the fact?
Right. Yeah, it's a whole lot to monitor, and I think we just want to be more proactive than that, right? So we want to know, we want to really pay attention to what we're changing, and we don't just like blindly say no to an update, right? So if we want to use that as an opportunity to start a conversation on that page, and let people see how their update's going to look. But like having that ad hoc workflow thing where it says like this is draft or this is like in a certain state is really good for people to notice as well. Makes sense. Yeah.
Hi. What was the overall timeline on your little project here?
Yeah, so I think we started relatively early in the year, like March probably, with some design work. And then we've, in earnest, been working on content for almost 2 quarters. And our goal is to get through the big initial products by the end of the year. So, but we're now a team of 4, so it's gotten faster as we've gone along, and we already have the frameworks in place and all that kind of stuff.
All right, we've got time for one more quick one, and then anything else we'll chase down afterwards.
Did I hear you right that you said your documentation people were actually tier 1 support for the product questions?
Internally, yep.
And can you tell me what % of their time it took to answer those? Was it 10%?
Yeah, it completely varies based on like if we have a new product, what's going on with the product. So we basically do it in like 1-week shifts. And it's only like business hours, so this isn't like emergency 2 a.m. I need an answer. For something like that, you always go to the product manager. But I would say on average, and now at this point, we're getting 4 or 5 questions a day maybe. So if they're quick to answer, it's just like, here's a link. A lot of them take a little more tracking down than that, since now we have the book in place, and a lot of it can be answered by itself. So.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca, for a great presentation. Thank you.